Amazon ads are expensive. Not understanding how much you should actually allocate to Amazon ads is killing most of your profits on Amazon. And I see this happening all the time. Brands scaling, increasing their ad spend, and then ending up with less profit than they actually started. Before we get into the video, I'll tell you who I am and why you should even listen to me. My name is Yanni. I've been in the e-com and Amazon space for over 5 years now, and I've sold millions with my own brands. And now I run a full service Amazon agency where we work with brands on Amazon only. That's our bread and butter. We work with over 25 brands and we manage over 20 million in yearly revenue, getting closer to 30 million now. And we manage millions and millions in ad spend. In this video, I want to talk about how much should you actually spend on ads. And the first thing to figure out is your margin, your gross margin. And when I talk about gross margin on Amazon, I'm talking the margin after the Amazon fees. Because the Amazon fees are so big and your gross margin before fees is 70%, many times it can end up with like 30-35% after Amazon fees. When we talk about gross margin on Amazon, we're talking about after Amazon fees. So if you have 30% margin, you know you can pretty much afford 30%. If you do 30%, you're going to be breaking even and making a loss because then you have some other costs. That's the first part to understand, your gross margin. So now that we know our margin and we know it's 30%, now from here we need to start ads. Now the complicated part comes here. In the launch phase, many times it's going to be a lot more expensive. So in that phase, you're going to be spending a lot more money. Many times you might exceed that 30% margin. So first thing first, you need to understand how expensive is your category. Something like supplements tend to be more expensive, but the lifetime value of the customer is much better because people tend to come back. So these are all numbers that you want to start understanding. If it's a one-off product, you need to be more profitable from day one because people are not going to return. If you're selling furniture, one customer is not going to buy 10 times from you unless it's a business, right? So you need to understand that part. If supplements and consumables, you can afford to spend more as long as your customer retention and subscribe and save is very strong, which again, you will only find out when you start selling more. At the beginning, you won't have that data. If it's a one-off product, you need to be a little bit less aggressive and trying to stay under that 30% margin. So as we said, launching is usually more expensive, but there's always different ways to do it. You can go really aggressive on launch and start spending a lot of money on ads, trying to rank for the most relevant keywords and spend more money to get there. And remember, Amazon is a momentum game, so more sales will equal to even more sales, and sales velocity plus conversion rate is what Amazon loves and what influences rank the most. So the more you're pushing ads, the more you're selling, the more sales you will get. But the key here is to make sure your conversion rate is good. If you're seeing a lot of clicks but not a lot of sales, if your conversion rate is 5%, 3%, 7%, and the average conversion rate for category is 20%, you need to be very careful because then you're scaling something that's burning money. Now, at the beginning, conversion rate many times is lower because you don't have that much authority in the space. You have 10, 20, 30 reviews with Vine, but that's it. Now, with the more sales you will get, conversion rate tends to improve as well because you start being more known in the market, you start showing up in better positions on Amazon. And something that people forget about is if you're on the second page compared to the first page, your conversion rate will be much lower and your sales will be much lower. Another route is to do less aggressive. So you still spend a good amount of money, but you try and be less aggressive and kind of be under that 30% margin so you're profitable from day one. That's more and more difficult to do. It's still possible, and that's what I call the slow and steady growth. So you're basically increasing sales slower, you're trying to kind of optimize as you go and trying to protect that margin. I've seen both ways succeed. This way can be a bit less risky because you're protecting more the margin, but it's also going to be slower in sales because when you go aggressive, if you have the right product and then you're in the right category, you can go quite fast to great position and you might lose money in the first couple of months, a significant amount of money sometimes, but then you start making profit and you're on a better trajectory. So there's no wrong in these things. It's what you would like to do. I love aggression as long as I have a long-term vision, as long as I have a long-term plan of how I'm going to turn profit. But again, there's no right and wrong here. It's about what you're comfortable with and what you can afford. Now, once you're out of that launch phase where it's more aggressive, then you go into the kind of the growth phase. You're starting to be a bit more of an established product. You're starting to see the growth. Not everything is against you. That's when, even if you're going very aggressive, you want to kind of start optimizing things, right? You want to make sure you're spending money after the right keywords. Now, if my gross margin is 30, I want my TACOs, total advertising cost of sale. I want to make sure that I'm spending less than 30% on ads. This way, if I'm starting to get close to that 20%, I'm starting to see profit, which will allow me to further invest in inventory and ads. This position is usually when you start seeing some fruits of your labor. The next phase is when you start becoming an established product. You start getting to those top 20, top 10, top 5 category, and you start seeing a lot more sales. Your organic sales are a lot higher now, and your ad sales are still high, but now many times you see 60% organic sales versus 40% ad sales, and that's where your profit really becomes big. And that's when your TACOs, your total advertising cost of sales, should be getting lower and lower. For example, if you're 30% gross margin and your TACOs is about 8 to 10%, that's where we really start to play and we really start to bring profits, especially when you do that at scale and at volume. There's a point with Amazon ads and advertising where you can have diminishing returns. And what I mean by that, if you're number one for a keyword, for sponsored or organic, and you keep on increasing the bid, there's no point because you cannot dominate that keyword already. So you many times, if you're paying $1.20 for that keyword and you keep on increasing it week over week, you might get to $2. So, and you're not really generating more sales, but you're spending a lot more money. So you need to be very careful in monitoring your sponsored ranks, your organic ranks, and overall ad spend to make sure that you're actually not having diminishing returns. Because one thing that I want to make extremely clear, ads should increase your profitability. Ads should increase your sales. They shouldn't take all the profitability out, because if they do, then what are you selling for? And don't get me wrong, you're not going to make money right away. But overall, for a long term, we need to make sure we're profitable, that we're cash flow positive. This way we can build a sustainable, profitable business. That's why you need to understand your numbers. You need to understand the data. Your gross margin is 30%. Long term, I want to make sure that I'm spending a lot less of that in ads, and that's paramount. To recap that, your ad spend and how much you should spend, it's really tied to your margin. The higher the gross margin, the more you can afford to spend on ads. The lower the gross margin, the less you can spend on ads. And of course, if it's a one-off product versus a consumable product, that further impacts this. You need to track profitability. You need to track your subscribe and save or your one-off customers. You need to track the data to know how much is it costing you to acquire a customer. Cost per acquisition is very important. If you understand that metric, you will be able to make some decisions that increase your profitability. So know your margin. Always know your gross margin, and always track it, and always be on top of Amazon FBA fees. Understand what phase you're in as well. If you're in the launch phase, it's going to be more expensive. If you're in the growth phase, it's still going to be expensive, but your tacos, it's going to start decreasing ideally. And then if you're in the maturity phase, when you're starting to dominate, your tacos should decrease even more. So you're becoming even more profitable. And you need to be very careful for what you're optimizing, because if you're being too passive in the launch phase, then you're not going to start at all. If you're being too aggressive in the maturity phase, then you're going to have a lot of diminishing returns and you're going to leave a lot of profit on the table. I hope you like this video. A lot more to come. Stay tuned.